Tim Petrowich here with Marion head football coach Kerry Martin as we get ready to head into week 3. Wildcats back on the road for 3 weeks in a row. First trip is Harrisburg on Friday night, but first let's talk about some Bulldogs of a different variety. Last Friday, the Highland Bulldogs were here in town and the Wildcats came away with a 57-21 victory, and I guess it's safe to say the offense kind of got going last week.
Yeah, they did. We stumbled a little bit in the first half with 3 turnovers, but we made a nice comeback in the second quarter, and from that point on, did a nice job. We didn't have to punt the whole night, which was good. The only time we really stopped, we stopped ourselves. So, we felt pretty good. There's still so many things we got to get better at, but we did feel better about the performance.
I was thinking about the game, and you talked about those 3 first quarter turnovers that really put a lot of pressure on your defense. Even after that, your defense had a lot of pressure put on them as far as being on the field a lot, because once you started scoring, you had a lot of 1- and 2-play drives that scored touchdowns as well.
We did. We had a span of 4 scores and 8 plays at one time, and that puts a lot of pressure on your defense. It's a good thing, but the defense was on the field for a whole lot more snaps than the offense was, and on a hot and muggy night like that, it makes it really difficult. We had daytime temperatures topping over 100 degrees by some accounts and very humid conditions. And so, rough night to be on the defensive side. But, they settled in after the first quarter and gave up 7 points the last 3 quarters. And I thought did a nice job for us.
And that's a real credit to them, because after the shaky first quarter and after giving up those 2 scores, they could have given up a lot of points. And to give up 7, as much as Highland had the ball, because I think they ran almost 2-to-1 the number of offensive plays you did.
I believe you're right. And I think we caused some of the problems. They would go on a drive, we'd get the ball back and fumble on the first play, putting the defense back out on the field with little or no rest. And on a night like that, when the first quarter temperatures were still hovering in the 90s, mid-90s, it wasn't an easy night to be on the defensive side. But they stood their ground and we battled back, and we got a cushion developed offensively, and they made some plays and they did a nice job.
I think some individuals that bear mentioning. First one that comes to mind is Justin Ivey. He had such a really rough first quarter with the 2 fumbles. Then he turns around and picks it up with the kick return for touchdown. And then, as you mentioned later in the game, some really key blocks in good situations for you as well.
I agree. And the sign of a good player is not mistakes, they know how to bounce back from them. And I thought, he made a couple of mistakes, and one we felt was his fault, one maybe wasn't his fault so much, or partially his, but to bounce back and get the kickoff return, which really got us back in the game and changed the momentum, and then making some plays, just blocking the unselfish side of the game where he's out there blocking the perimeter and throwing some key blocks and sealing the edge for us on some big runs by Shaq and Cedric. So I felt like he really showed a lot of character as a player and as an individual by what he did, not so much when he had the ball all the time, but when he was away from the ball.
Let's talk about Shaq a little bit. We know he was sick early in the week, missed a couple practices, and that's why he didn't get to start. But when he came in the second quarter. In the second, third quarter, he had 168 yards and 5 touchdowns in 2 quarters. It's a pretty good effort.
It's a pretty good effort. He did and again, I want to commend him. He struggled a little bit blocking against Granite City week 1, and admittedly so, and he knew that, and he's worked hard to improve on that, and did a really nice job. Besides the running and the touchdowns and all that stuff, just blocking was better for him.
Cedric Neal. You could see in the first quarter in the runs that he was starting to get things right. He was still doing a little bit of the dancing and the shaking and baking that he was trying to do instead of just running to the hole. He came out in the third quarter and it looked like someone fired him out of a slingshot.
Yeah, that was a heck of a run to start the second half, and you're right, he looked quick, and Cedric's got that ability, and sometimes you do got to live with the fact that he dances a little bit, but when he hits the hole and he gets at full speed, he can move, and he's put on about 15 pounds since last year, which makes him a little harder to tackle. Last year he was, not a big tackle breaking kind of runner, but he can break some tackles now, and he's catching the ball better, and so he's a nice compliment. He and Henry Jones both are a nice compliment in the backfield to Shaq.
And then, you don't really see this a whole lot. I don't think you see it in high school very much at all. Sean Nurnberger had 6 kicks for touchbacks out of 8 kickoffs, and boy, what a difference he makes when he's out there for you. It would have made a huge difference in the Granite City game, obviously, but to have a kid in high school have 6 touchbacks is unheard of.
I agree. I don't know what else to say. it's just an awesome thing to see a kid come out and kick the way he did, and to kick the 42-yard field goal and make it with 10 or 15 yards to spare, whatever he did, and you know, just had a nice game for us, and is a great compliment to our team, and just makes our special teams so much better. It's a nice weapon to have, to make other teams start at the 20-yard line. Really makes play calling quite a bit different for most teams, and forces them to get 2 or 3 more first downs than they normally would have to get, and that's just a big part of what we're doing right now, is having Sean dictate some field position for us.
Granite City's a pretty good team, we'll say that. Highland, we know, is rebuilding and struggling. You're going to play a team this week in Harrisburg that defensively is probably the toughest team you've played. That's the thing that's really stood out for them this year, is their defense. And not only are they slowing people down, they beat a good Mount Carmel team, they beat a good DuQuoin team. They're scoring points off their defense. They've had 2 interception returns for touchdowns this year, so they've really got things going defensively. It's going to be a tough battle for you this week.
Absolutely, it will be. You know, it's a good football team, and Coach Roper does such a good job, and he's had a great run there as their head coach, and building a football team in his image. You know, after working there the first couple of years, kind of in the shadow of Alway, and I think he's starting to develop his own image now, his own program, and getting his players in there, and kids that only know him as the head coach, and you know, Al had so much success there for so long, and was an amazing football coach. But Jason has really done a great job. It's tough taking a job over for someone who's been that successful, and Jason has really done a nice job of now establishing himself as an outstanding football coach, and I consider him a good friend, and I'm proud of what he's achieved so far. His kids are playing well on offense, defense, and special teams, and that's the mark of a good football team.
He's had a couple teams that have gotten into the playoffs, but do you think possibly this could be the best all-around team that Jason's had since he's been over there?
You know, having not played them, I don't know, and having only seen them on film, I can't always judge until I play a team, but it's certainly off to a 2-0 start, first time since 2000. You know, I mean, it must be an awfully good football team. I know on film they're fundamentally sound, and they do a lot of things well, and the quarterback's a good player, and I don't know if this team maybe doesn't have as many standout players as maybe some previous teams had, but maybe they're playing better together than previous teams, and really that's what it all comes down to. You know, they've had some outstanding players in the last few years, individual players, along with some good teams, but maybe this bunch is gelling and playing better together, and that could really be the key to their success.
And this seems like a team that doesn't really beat themselves. You don't see a whole lot of mistakes made by this Harrisburg team. And conversely, your club has put the ball on the turf a few times and had some turnovers and had some mistakes on the offensive end. And those are things, I think, this week in particular that you really have to battle against.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And you're right, they haven't made a lot of mistakes, and they've been opportunistic in capitalizing on other people's mistakes. And so we've got to make sure we take care of the ball and don't set ourselves up for another 2-touchdown deficit in the first quarter like we've done. But I will say this, I'm pretty proud of our kids. In the last 2 ball games, we have been down at least 2 scores twice, or 3 times, I think, and been able to battle back from those deficits. And you know, we don't want to be in those situations, but I think it shows a lot of character with our kids to battle back and never give up, and to you know, to continue fighting. But we did improve from the first week in a lot of areas, but we have to see that continued improvement if we're going to continue winning ball games. Harrisburg is going to be a very tough opponent, and the conference schedule starts the following week. So we're looking for another big step towards getting better this week.
I think when you look at this game and then look at this Harrisburg team we've talked about comparing to previous teams, I think maybe one place where you have a little bit of an advantage is that they may not have the overall team speed they've had in the past. They don't have the kids like John David Rollins and some of those kids. This is one of your quicker teams, obviously, and that's one of the things you've been able to use against your first 2 opponents is your team speed. I would assume the game plan is, again, to spread the field, take advantage of that quickness, and try and find the openings.
Yeah, it's not a shock. I mean, you know, it really isn't. I mean, it's not giving away any secrets. I mean, and I'm sure Jason knows we're going to do our best to get the ball in the hands of our playmaker kids and let them make plays. And my job as a coach is not to outthink myself. My job is to put the ball in their hands in as many different ways as I can, and keep them guessing who I'm going to get the ball to and how I'm going to get it to them. And that's our game plan. I mean, it has to be our game plan. It was our game plan the first week and the second week, and it's the job of Matt and Brett to facilitate that and go out and put the ball in the hands of those guys that can make plays.
And are you taking into consideration the amount of time the defense had on the field last week? Are you hoping maybe to put together some sustained drives, or if you score on the first play, it really doesn't matter?
Could care less. You know, the bottom line is score. Our defense, and we've been through this before, we've had discussions before, and Coach Seaman, my staff, defensive staff, understands the bottom line is put points on the board. We'll deal with whatever situation comes up. So we're going to put points on the board. We're never going to try to pace ourselves as far as drawing a drive out just so we can give our defense a rest. We're trying to score on every play we can. So we'll just let time of possession be a statistic people can look at and wonder, should we have more or less? As long as we're winning games and we're scoring points, that's all I care about.
And last Friday night, to their credit, the second and third unit defense did a pretty good job
They
too,
did.
and they actually kept Highland off the board.
They did, and I tell you what, it's a great point, and I was real proud of our second team kids and some of our third team kids that I thought came in and gave us some quality reps. Dustin Irwin and some other kids, Logan Hunt, came in on offense and did a nice job, and on defense I saw some young kids step up and play well, and John Evans we had back for the first time in a while, and Hunter Odom, sophomore kid, stepping in and playing well for us. So there were a lot of kids that stepped in. I always tell the kids, you know, once you're on the field playing, you're now a starter. I don't care whether you're the second or third team starter. Once you step onto the field, you're now a starter in our system. And no matter what the score, you're expected to go out and play well. And I was real proud of the effort we got from our kids.
Last year in this game here, you scored the first 21 points. I think it was 21-3 at halftime. Offensively, you kind of let down a little bit in the second half. What are you going to tell the kids? If you get that 21-0 or 21-3 lead this week, obviously you don't want to let up.
No, and yeah, I mean that's not characteristic of what we do. I don't know what happened in that ball game. I went back and watched the film several times since then, and I've noticed we drove the ball in the second half last year, but we just didn't score. We found ways to. We just lost some intensity in the second half of that game, and I think we can't do that. You can't do that against anybody, especially against a good team like Harrisburg. So we've got to make sure we play 4 quarters, cut down our mistakes, get the ball to our playmakers, and see what happens.
Short road trip. Your team travels well, obviously. You always have a big fan following, even on long road trips. So this might not be so much of a road game as people would think.
We have great fans. I never feel like we're on the road. I've never felt like we're on the road. I feel like once our fans get behind us, it's a home game for us. At least on our sideline it is. It may not be on their sideline, but on our sideline it's a home football game. And we've got very proud fans, and Wildcat Nation will be there rooting for us, and they'll energize us, and we'll give them all we got.
Friday night in Taylor Field in Harrisburg, the Marion Wildcats and the Harrisburg Bulldogs. For Marion head football coach Kerry Martin, this is Tim Petrowich for Dateline Marion.